The archetype of the envious shadow, when the inner dragon awakens. In the intimate theatre of the human psyche, every soul carries within itself a sleeping dragon, that which Jung termed the shadow. This mythical creature is not merely the repository of our repressed impulses, but the fierce guardian of everything we refuse to see in ourselves. Secret envy is one of the most refined manifestations of this shadow, for it disguises itself as virtue while silently devouring the heart of its host. Imagine a garden where two trees grow side by side. One flourishes exuberantly in the sunlight, while the other, in the shadow of the first, develops roots that secretly drain nutrients from the shared soil. This is the nature of hidden envy. It does not manifest as a roar of rage, but as a silent parasite that feeds on others' light. The secret envious person has developed a subtle art, transforming their own perceived deficiency into a moral critique of others' success. Like an alchemist in reverse, they transmute their inner lead not into gold, but into poison disguised as wisdom. Their words carry the authority of virtue, but their roots plunge into the swamp of comparison and resentment. Jung observed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The first sign of secret envy lies precisely in this constant irritation with the success, happiness, or qualities of certain people. It is not occasional or justified irritation, but a visceral discomfort that seems disproportionate to the situation. This inner dragon feeds on the fantasy that life is a zero-sum game, that others' success necessarily diminishes our own possibilities. It is a worldview that transforms every achievement of others into a personal affront, every genuine smile into a silent provocation. The poisoned compliment. When sweet words carry thorns. In the subtle symphony of human communication, there exists a discordant note that only the most attentive ears can detect, the compliment laced with poison. Like a Trojan gift, these apparently kind words carry within their interior the seeds of subtle destruction. The secret envious person masters this dark art with the skill of a virtuoso. Their words dance on the tightrope between admiration and depreciation, executing a performance that would make Machiavelli proud. How lucky you are! A seemingly innocent phrase that in the right context and with precise intonation manages to transform a legitimate achievement into a cosmic accident. Jung understood that the unconscious rarely lies completely. It prefers to distort truth through subtle defense mechanisms. The poisoned compliment is one of these mechanisms, a way for the envious ego to maintain its image as a good and generous person, while secretly sabotaging the object of its envy. Observe how these compliments work. They always contain a hidden clause that diminishes the merit of the person being praised. You're so talented, it must be wonderful to be born with that gift. A phrase that simultaneously recognizes talent and attributes it entirely to genetic luck, removing any credit for effort or dedication. It is as if the envious person were an art critic who, unable to create their own masterpiece, dedicates themselves to finding flaws in the frames of others' paintings. They cannot deny the beauty of the painting, so they attack the presentation, the circumstances, or the ease with which it was created. This dynamic reveals one of the deepest wounds of the envious psyche, the inability to genuinely celebrate others' success. For the secret envious person, every achievement of another is evidence of their own inadequacy, and the poisoned compliment becomes a way to restore psychic balance, diminishing the other to feel less diminished themselves. The projected shadow, the mirror that reflects our deepest fears. In one of psychology's most revolutionary insights, Jung unveiled the mechanism of projection, our unconscious tendency to see in others what we refuse to recognize in ourselves. Secret envy uses this mechanism as its most sophisticated weapon, transforming the envious person into a moral critic of the very impulses they themselves carry. Imagine a man who, before a mirror, sees not his own reflection, but the distorted image of everything he fears to be. The secret envious person lives in a world of mirrors where every successful person reflects back their own insecurities and unrealized ambitions. Their instinctive response is to attack the mirror, not understanding. They are, in truth, attacking themselves. This projection manifests in particularly insidious forms. The secret envious person becomes a self-appointed moral guardian, dedicating disproportionate energy to criticizing the methods, ethics, or authenticity of those who have achieved what they themselves desire. It is as if they were a judge, judging others for crimes they have secretly fantasized about committing. They only got that because they have no scruples, declares the envious person, projecting their own ethical shadow onto others' success. In reality, they are revealing their own inner struggle, the part of themselves that would question their own principles if it guaranteed desired success. Jung observed that what we most vehemently condemn in others often reveals our own repressed impulses. The secret envious person who incessantly criticizes others' luck or privileges is, in truth, expressing their own despair at not having these advantages. They project their inner bitterness as sociological or moral analysis, but the roots are deeply personal. This dynamic creates a vicious cycle. The more the envious person projects their shadows onto others, the further they move from the possibility of confronting and integrating their own denied aspects. They become prisoners of their own projection, condemned to see flaws where they could see inspiration, manipulation where they could see competence. The silent saboteur, the subtle art of undermining without detection. In the depths of the collective, unconscious, where humanity's most primitive archetypes dwell, we find the figure of the saboteur, one who destroys not with brute force, but with refined cunning. The secret envious person embodies this archetype in a particular way, developing an almost artistic ability to undermine others' success while maintaining a facade of innocence or even support. Like a corrupt gardener who, instead of watering the neighbor's flowers, adds salt to the soil when no one is looking, the silent saboteur operates in the shadows of social consciousness. Their actions are calculated to appear accidental, their omissions disguised as forgetfulness, their interventions masked as genuine concern. Jung understood that autonomous complexes, these dissociated fragments of the psyche, can operate independently of consciousness, directing behaviors that the ego itself does not fully recognize. The envy complex can transform an apparently kind person into an unconscious saboteur, someone who genuinely believes they are helping while systematically destroying. Observe how this manifests: the colleague who always forgets to pass along important information, but only to those who stand out. The friend who offers advice that, if followed, would inevitably lead to failure. The family member who plants seeds of doubt about important decisions precisely at crucial moments. The silent saboteur is a master of subtle timing. They intuitively understand that timing is everything, that a word of discouragement at the right moment can be more destructive than 1,000 direct criticisms. Like a conductor directing a symphony of destruction, they orchestrate interferences that seem like cosmic coincidences. This form of envy is particularly dangerous because it hides behind a mask of virtue. The saboteur often sees themselves as a protector, as someone who is just trying to help or being realistic. They have developed an internal narrative that justifies their destructive actions as acts of tough love or practical wisdom. Obsessive comparison, the inner tribunal that never rests. In the inner tribunal of the human psyche, where the ego acts, simultaneously as judge, jury, and accused, one of consciousness's oldest dramas unfolds daily: comparative judgment. For the secret envious person, this tribunal never adjourns, maintaining perpetual activity, constantly weighing their worth against others on a scale that never finds balance. Jung perceived that individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, requires transcending this obsessive comparative tendency. However, the secret envious person remains imprisoned in this cycle, like a hamster on an infinite wheel of comparisons that generates movement without real progress. The comparative mind operates like a malfunctioning computer, processing selective data to always arrive at the same painful conclusion: I'm not enough. It collects evidence like an obsessed detective, but only that which confirms its preconceived thesis of inadequacy. One's own successes are minimized as accidents or luck. Others' successes are magnified as evidence of natural superiority or unfair advantages. This process reveals one of the deepest ironies of the envious psyche. In the desperate attempt to measure itself against others, it completely loses sight of its own measure. Like an artist who spends so much time studying other masters' techniques that they never develop their own style, the secret envious person becomes an expert in everyone except themselves. Obsessive comparison manifests in revealing behavioral patterns: the compulsive need to know details about others' lives, the inability to hear about others' successes without immediately mentioning their own achievements, the tendency to transform every conversation into a subtle competition where points are constantly scored and measured. It is as if the envious person lived in an eternal game where the rules constantly change to ensure they remain at a disadvantage. When others achieve financial success, they value artistic achievement. When others shine in art, they emphasize the importance of material stability. This infinite dance reveals not versatility, but the desperation of a psyche constantly seeking new criteria to justify its sense of inferiority, the collector of failures, the shadow archaeology of others' defects. In the underground chambers of the envious mind, there exists a peculiar museum, a meticulously catalogued collection of failures, errors, and moments of vulnerability in others. The curator of this shadow exhibition is an aspect of the secret envious person that Jung might have recognized as a perversion of the wise archetype, someone who, instead of collecting wisdom to illuminate, collects defects to destroy. This collector operates with the patience of an archaeologist and the precision of a surgeon. They document every stumble, every poorly chosen word, every moment of weakness from those who awaken their envy. Like a selective historian, they preserve only records that serve their purpose, building a case against the perceived superiority of their targets. The psychology behind this compulsion reveals a desperate attempt to restore psychic balance. For the secret envious person, every discovered flaw in another is like finding a crack in an apparently perfect statue, evidence that no one is truly superior, that the perceived hierarchy is an illusion. Jung understood that what we most observe in others reflects our own inner complexes. The collector of failures is, in truth, projecting their own sense of imperfection. By meticulously cataloguing others' flaws, they are attempting to create an external inventory of their own inner self-criticism. This dynamic manifests in specific behaviors: selective memory that forgets kindnesses but perfectly remembers every slip, the tendency to casually mention others' past errors at strategic moments, the ability to transform any achievement of others into an opportunity to remember previous failures. Most revealing is that this collector rarely applies the same rigorous standard to themselves. Their own errors are contextualized, explained, justified. They are accidents of the journey, not evidence of character. But others' failures are treated as revelations of their true nature, windows into their fundamental inadequacies. This asymmetry is not accidental. It is a protective function of the ego. By maintaining a detailed inventory of others' imperfections, the secret envious person builds a psychological fortress against their own feelings of inadequacy. It is as if they were saying to the universe, "Look, even those who seem superior are flawed. Therefore, my own imperfection is universal and acceptable." Passive resistance to others' success. The art of not cooperating without appearing to obstruct. In the subtle theater of human relations, there exists a form of resistance so refined that it often goes unnoticed even by its perpetrators. It is passive resistance, a negative gravitational force that pulls downward without ever pushing directly. The secret envious person masters this art with virtuoso skill, creating an invisible force field that makes others' success more difficult to achieve or maintain. Jung identified that the psyche possesses defense mechanisms that operate below the threshold of consciousness, protecting the ego from truths it considers unbearable. Passive resistance is one of these mechanisms, a way for the secret envious person to express their opposition to others' success while maintaining their self-image as a good and supportive person. Like water that finds the path of least resistance, but in doing so, gradually erodes the hardest stones. This form of envy operates through omission, delay, and calculated inertia. The secret envious person becomes a specialist in the art of not doing, not providing information that could help, not making connections that could open doors, not offering support that could make a difference. This resistance manifests in apparently innocent forms: enthusiasm that never translates into concrete action, promises of help that always encounter last-minute obstacles, availability that mysteriously disappears at crucial moments. It is as if the envious person were an actor who forgets their lines precisely in the most important scenes of others' plays. The perverse genius of this strategy lies in its plausible deniability. When confronted, the passive resistor always has reasonable explanations. They were busy, forgot, had an unexpected situation. These excuses are not necessarily conscious lies. Often, the envious person believes them as their unconscious orchestrates circumstances to make them true. Jung observed that the unconscious is profoundly creative, capable of generating synchronicities that serve its hidden purposes. The passive resistor becomes a master at creating coincidences that impede others' progress. The email that arrives a day late, the meeting that needs to be rescheduled repeatedly, the recommendation that is never sent. Most insidious is that this form of sabotage often disguises itself as protection or concern. The secret envious person may actually believe they are being helpful by alerting to risks, by being realistic about difficulties, by not wanting to create false hopes. They transform their inner resistance into a narrative of wisdom and the emotional spy, constant surveillance of others' feelings. In the shadows of social consciousness operates a particular type of observer, the emotional spy. Unlike the traditional spy who seeks strategic information, this secret agent of envy collects data about the emotional and psychological state of their targets, always searching for signs of vulnerability, dissatisfaction, or decline. For the secret envious person, knowing others' suffering becomes a source of psychological relief, evidence that the perceived hierarchy is not as absolute as it seemed. Jung understood that projection is often accompanied by hypervigilance toward the object of projection. The secret envious person develops an almost paranormal sensitivity to detect emotional nuances in those who awaken their envy. Like a human seismograph, they register the slightest oscillations in mood, confidence, or satisfaction of their targets. This emotional surveillance manifests through apparently empathetic curiosity, but which possesses a subtle invasive quality. The emotional spy asks questions that seem to demonstrate care, but which in reality are probes designed to map the intimate territory of others' psyches. "How are you really feeling?" becomes less an offer of support and more a reconnaissance expedition. Most revealing is the spy's reaction when they discover evidence that their target is not completely happy or satisfied. There is a gleam in the eyes, a poorly disguised satisfaction, a renewed energy that contrasts with the superficial, compassion expressed verbally. It is as if they were an art critic who finally found a crack in the masterpiece that so bothered them. This dynamic reveals one of the most disturbing truths about secret envy. It feeds not only on its own success, but on others' failure. The secret envious person develops a parasitic relationship with others' problems, extracting psychological validation from every sign that the grass isn't so green on the other side. Jung observed that what we most seek in others often reflects what we most fear in ourselves. The emotional spy obsessively seeks signs of unhappiness in others because they project their own inner dissatisfaction. Every evidence of others' suffering becomes proof that their own unhappiness is not exceptional, but universal. The irony is that this constant surveillance prevents the envious person from constructively addressing their own emotional issues. Instead of using their emotional sensitivity to understand themselves, they waste it mapping others' inner territory. They become experts in others' sufferings while remaining strangers to their own pain. Reality distortion, the prism of envy, that refracts truth. In the optics of human perception, envy acts as a peculiar prism, not one that reveals the complete spectrum of light, but one that systematically distorts reality's colors to suit the observer's psychological needs. The secret envious person inhabits a parallel universe, where facts are constantly reinterpreted through filters that protect their self-image while diminishing others. Jung understood that perception is never neutral. It is always filtered through the complexes and archetypes that inhabit our unconscious. For the secret envious person, this filter operates like a malicious editor, selecting and modifying information to create a narrative that justifies their feelings and attitudes. This distortion manifests in subtle but systematic ways. Others' success is automatically attributed to external factors, luck, connections, favorable timing, while failures are seen as revelations of true character. It is as if the envious person possessed special glasses that make everything that shines in others appear artificial, while everything that fails seems authentic. The perverse genius of this distortion lies in its internal coherence. The secret envious person is not simply lying, they are living in a carefully constructed alternative reality where their perceptions make perfect sense. Like a scientist who only accepts data that confirms their hypothesis, they develop an observation methodology that always reaches the same reassuring conclusions. This distorted reality has its own physical laws. Others' efforts are always less than they seem. Their achievements always more fragile than they appear. Their happiness always more superficial than they demonstrate. It is a universe where psychological gravity constantly pulls downward the perception of others, while creating a fictional upward force for their own self-image. Jung observed that autonomous complexes can create their own internal realities, operating as secondary personalities with their own belief systems. The secret envy complex becomes, literally, a filter through which all reality is processed, a second pair of eyes that sees the world exclusively in terms that protect the wounded. Ego, most tragic, is that this distortion prevents the envious person from learning from others' success. Instead of seeing others' achievements as evidence of what is possible, they see them as confirmation of their own limitations or disadvantages. Distorted reality becomes a psychological prison that strengthens itself with each new biased interpretation. T. Perpetual critic, the incessant symphony of disapproval. In the conservatory of the envious mind, there is always one voice in activity, that of the perpetual critic. This shadow maestro conducts an incessant orchestra of judgments, analyses, and evaluations, all tuned to the same minor key: systematic disapproval of everything that represents success, happiness, or achievement in others. For the secret envious person, this critical voice becomes both shield and sword, protecting them from the pain of comparison while attacking the validity of others' accomplishments. Jung identified that compulsive criticism often reveals more about the critic than about the object being criticized. In the case of the secret envious person, this perpetual criticism functions as a sophisticated defense mechanism. If they can find faults in everything others do, then their own inaction or failure becomes not only justifiable, but virtuous. The perpetual critic develops a specialization in finding problems where others see solutions, risks where others see opportunities, superficiality where others see authenticity. It is as if they possessed a special lens that can only focus on negative aspects, completely ignoring any positive qualities that might be present. This criticism has distinctive characteristics. It is disproportionate to the situation, persistent, even when unnecessary, and always finds something to question. More revealing still, it tends to be more severe, precisely with those who most awaken the critic's envy. It is as if there were an inverse correlation between secret admiration and public generosity of judgment. The sophistication of this criticism lies in its ability to disguise itself as discernment, high standards, or genuine concern. The perpetual critic rarely sees themselves as negative. They perceive themselves as someone who simply sees through appearances, who isn't easily fooled, who possesses higher standards than average. Jung understood that what we most criticize in others often represents aspects of ourselves we cannot accept. The perpetual critic is, in truth, externalizing their own inner self-criticism. Every flaw they identify in others is a mirror of their own insecurities projected onto the external world. Most tragic is that this constant criticism creates a negative energy field around the secret envious person. They become known as someone who always finds problems, who always has reservations, who can never simply celebrate or support. This reputation, in turn, feeds even more their sense of isolation and difference, creating a vicious cycle that perpetuates itself. The mask of virtue, when envy dresses in moral principles. In the grand theatre of human existence, perhaps there is no more convincing actor than one who represents virtue, while their heart pulses with envy. This is the supreme irony of the psyche, our capacity to transform our darkest vices into apparent virtues, creating a moral alchemy that transmutes envy's lead into virtue's false gold. Jung perceived that the persona, the mask we present to the world, can become so elaborate that even its bearer forgets what lies behind it. The secret envious person develops a virtue persona that is simultaneously their greatest work of art and their deepest psychological prison. This mask manifests in particularly sophisticated forms. The envious person becomes a passionate defender of justice when criticizing others' privileges, an advocate for authenticity when questioning others' success, a guardian of equality when resenting others' advantages. Their darkest emotions are distilled into apparently noble principles. The perverse genius of this strategy is that it allows the secret envious person to fully express their hostility while maintaining, even to themselves, a morally superior self-image. Like a corrupt politician hiding behind speeches about ethics, they manage to attack without ever taking responsibility for the attack. This dynamic creates one of the most insidious forms of envy, as it becomes literally unquestionable. How can one criticize someone who is defending justice, equality, authenticity? The secret envious person becomes invulnerable to direct confrontation, protected by armor of apparent virtues that deflects any criticism. Jung observed that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, an observation that gains new meaning when applied to envy masked as virtue. The secret envious person may genuinely believe in their own elevated motivations, creating a profound dissociation between their real impulses and their conscious narrative. Most disturbing is that this mask often convinces not only the envious person themselves, but also those around them. Society, always ready to applaud virtuous speeches, may inadvertently reinforce and validate these disguised expressions of envy, creating a system that rewards vice disguised as virtue. This alchemical transformation of envy into moral superiority represents perhaps the most sophisticated of the ego's defense mechanisms. It is proof that the human psyche can be simultaneously the most honest and most deceptive of territories, capable of creating truths that are paradoxically fundamental lies. The path of integration, transforming shadow into wisdom at the end. Of this journey through the shadowy territories of secret envy, we arrive at what Jung considered the true purpose of all psychological knowledge, not merely to identify and catalogue our shadow aspects, but to integrate them consciously and transformatively. Envy, when recognized and understood, can become one of the most powerful catalysts for personal growth and individuation. Jung taught that what we resist persists, what we accept transforms. Secret envy maintains its destructive power precisely because it operates in the shadows, feeding on secrecy and denial. When brought into the light of consciousness, it loses much of its compulsive force and reveals its true nature, an alarm signal from the psyche indicating areas where our growth has been interrupted or our authenticity compromised. The first step in integrating the envious shadow is what Jung called recognition without judgment. This means observing our envious impulses with the scientific curiosity of a naturalist studying a rare species, without the self-criticism that only forces these impulses back into the shadows. "Ah, I am feeling envious of this person" becomes a neutral observation, an interesting psychological datum, not a moral condemnation. This recognition reveals precious information about our authentic values and growth directions. Envy is often an emotional map, showing us exactly where we would like to be in our own lives. Instead of wasting energy attacking those who possess what we desire, we can use that energy to understand and pursue our own authentic goals. The transformation of envy into wisdom requires what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing tensions in consciousness until a third possibility emerges. In the case of envy, this means simultaneously sustaining our desire for what others possess and our gratitude for what we already have, our genuine admiration for others and our appreciation of our own unique gifts. This integration produces an extraordinary psychological alchemy. Transformed envy becomes inspiration. What was once a poison that corroded from within becomes a fuel that propels forward. The energy that was being wasted on projections and sabotage can be redirected toward creation and self-realization. Jung observed that the darkest aspects of personality, when integrated, often become our greatest strengths. The former envious, Person who has integrated their shadow develops a unique capacity to genuinely celebrate others' success, precisely because they intimately know the temptation to do otherwise. They become a powerful ally in others' growth, understanding both internal and external obstacles. This transformation also produces a special form of empathetic wisdom. Having navigated the dark territories of comparison and resentment, the integrated individual can recognize and help others still trapped in these dynamics. They become, in Jung's words, a wounded healer, someone whose own healed wound becomes a source of healing for others. The integration process is not a definitive cure, but an ongoing commitment to consciousness. Envy may resurface, especially in moments of vulnerability or transition. But each resurgence becomes an opportunity to deepen understanding, to refine, the ability to recognize and transform these impulses before they crystallize into destructive behaviors. The ultimate goal is not the elimination of envy, a human impossibility, but its conscious transmutation. The individual who has completed this alchemical journey has discovered one of Jungian psychology's deepest secrets, that our greatest poisons, when understood and integrated, become our most potent medicines. Thus, secret envy reveals its true face, not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a teacher to be understood, a guide to be followed back to our own authentic center, where all comparison dissolves in the irreducible singularity of who we truly are. The mirror of the soul, Jung, once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In this journey through the shadowy territories of secret envy, we have discovered that each sign identified in the other is, in truth, an invitation to look more deeply within ourselves. Envy, in all its subtle and destructive manifestations, serves as a mirror of the soul, not only reflecting our darkest aspects, but also revealing our unrealized potentials, our authentic values, and our growth directions. Each moment of honest recognition of these patterns in ourselves becomes an opportunity for liberation and transformation. The true power of this knowledge does not lie in using it to identify and judge others, but in applying it with compassion and courage to our own journey of individuation. For only when we integrate our own shadows can we truly see others with clarity and compassion, free from the projections that distort our perception and relationships. In the end, secret envy teaches us one of Jungian psychology's most profound truths, that the path to wholeness, psychological completeness, necessarily passes through the recognition and integration of everything we would prefer to deny in ourselves. Only thus can we emerge from the darkness of comparisons into the light of unique and unrepeatable authenticity.